Section 5 of The Radio Boys with the Forest Rangers by Alan Chapman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 5, The Wonderful Science, read by Tom Hirsch. The effect of this closing sentence on the Radio Boys was electric. They had been engrossed in the subject of the talk, and the personal twist that came at the end took them utterly by surprise. Bob jumped as though he had been shot, and Jimmy nearly fell off his chair. "Well, what do you think of that?" exclaimed Joe as soon as he got his breath. "Wasn't that dandy of the old scout?" sputtered Herb, not yet recovered from his surprise. "Talking to hundreds of thousands and yet taking time to send a special message to us," remarked Bob with deep gratification. "Radio boys of Clintonia," chuckled Jimmy. "Guess we're some bumpkins, say what?" "How I wish we could answer back and tell him what we thought of his address," observed Joe regretfully. "You'll have a chance to do that when you see him face to face," Bob reminded him. "You remember that he said he'd call on us soon." "Can't be too soon to suit me," declared Herb emphatically. "And that's the man who began by saying that he wasn't a practiced orator," commented Bob. "Gee, I think it was one of the most eloquent things I ever heard. I wouldn't have missed a word of it. I'll bet that if he'd have delivered that in a crowded hall, his hearers would have raised the roof." "He's there with the goods, all right," agreed Joe. "And did you notice how modest he was? Not a word about his own personal adventures, but boosting the other fellows to beat the band. I tell you, that fellow's a real man." "We were in luck when we got acquainted with him," declared Bob. "And by the way, fellows, did you ever stop to think how many fine fellows we've met in the radio line? There's Frank Brandon and Brandon Harvey and Payne Bentley, all of them princes." "Not to mention Dr. Dale," put in Herb. "Of course, we knew him before, but we never got real close to him until we took up this radio work." "What a treat it would be to get those four together and get them started talking about radio," ejaculated Joe. "Maybe we wouldn't learn something." "You said it," affirmed Jimmy. "I wouldn't want to say a word, but just sit still and listen." There were still other numbers on the program of WJZ, but the boys were so absorbed in Mr. Bentley and his talk that they did not care for anything else that night. They sat talking it over until Joe, looking at his watch, was startled to find that it was nearly midnight. "Guess we'd better be making tracks," he said, reaching for his cap. Jimmy was the only one of the visitors who did not follow his example. "Glued to the chair?" inquired Herb flippantly. "Going to make Bob twice glad by staying all night?" "I was thinking," said Jimmy dreamily, "of a little word that I heard earlier in the evening. A very little word it was, but it means a lot in my young life. Only 3 letters. Let me see. P-I-E. Yeah, that's it. Pie. I knew I'd be able to recall it." "That's a safe bet," said Joe. "If you remembered your lessons half as well, you'd stand higher in your classes." Bob, recalled to his duties as host, hurried to the pantry, whence he returned bearing one of the apple pies for which Mrs. Layton was famous. "Do you think you'd better eat anything so late at night, Jimmy?" asked Herb with mock solicitude. "I don't think. I know," returned Jimmy with emphasis. "It may kill me, but at least I die happy. But I don't believe it'll kill me. Do you remember what I did in that pie-eating contest up in the woods? Don't forget that I'm a champion." Bob started to cut the pie into 4 equal pieces when Jimmy intervened. "Remember your promise, Bob," he said. "It was to have twice as much as these crooks who robbed me of my doughnuts. Cut it into 5 pieces and give me 2 of them." "Your figuring is rotten, Jimmy," declared Joe. "That would give you twice as much as either Herb or me, and so far it's all right, but it would also give you twice as much as Bob, and that wasn't in the bargain. He didn't swipe one of your doughnuts." Jimmy looked perplexed. He was not especially strong in mathematics. "That's so," he admitted. "Suppose then we cut it into 6 pieces. That'll be 2 for Bob, 2 for me, and 1 apiece for you crooks." "There again you're wrong," persisted the implacable Joe. "It's all right for you to have double what we have, but where does Bob come in to have 2 to our 1? We didn't rob him of a doughnut." Now poor Jimmy was puzzled indeed. It was clear to him that if the pie were cut in 5 pieces, of which he had 2, he would have an unfair advantage over Bob. There was no reason why he should have twice what Bob had. On the other hand, if it were cut in 6 pieces, of which Bob had 2, Bob, for no reason whatever, would have twice as much as Herb or Joe. How could the pie be cut so that Bob would have his fair share and no more, and yet Jimmy have twice as much as either Herb or Joe? Into exactly how many equal pieces must it be divided so that justice might be done? Perhaps some of our young readers might be puzzled to answer the question. Jimmy certainly was. So much so, in fact, that he made a virtue of necessity and decided to be generous. "Oh, all right," he said with a magnificent gesture. "Cut it into 4 equal pieces and let it go at that. I'll get even with you fellas some other way." "How sweet of you," replied Joe, grinning, hastening to grab his quarter before Jimmy should repent of his offer. "Only I'm not sure whether this is softness of heart or softness of brain. You'd never have done it if you hadn't gotten mixed up in your figuring." Jimmy tried to think of some crushing retort, but by that time he had started to eat the pie, and he put his whole attention so thoroughly on the work that less important things were forgotten. The next afternoon, as Bob was going down to his father's store, he ran across Dr. Dale. After the doctor had made inquiries as to how Mr. Layton was progressing, Bob asked him, "By the way, Doctor, were you listening in at WJZ last night?" "No, I wasn't," replied the doctor. "Was there anything that was especially interesting?" "We found it so," responded Bob, and then proceeded to give an outline of the talk of the forest ranger. "It must have been fine," Dr. Dale commented when Bob had concluded. "I have a personal interest in forestry work for reasons that I will tell you about when I have more time. I'm glad to hear that Mr. Bentley is going to visit you, and I would like to come around and get acquainted with him." "I'll tell you when he comes," promised Bob. "One reason that I missed his talk last night," the doctor went on, "was that for the greater part of the evening I was listening in at WGY. Those, you remember, are the call letters of the Schenectady station. They've got a wonderful new contrivance there that's going to make a sensation in the radio world when it becomes generally known." "One more miracle to be put down to the account of radio, I suppose," replied Bob with an appreciative smile. "You might almost call it that," replied the doctor. "Some weeks ago, WGY told its audience that a new device different from the phonograph was being used to talk into the radio transmitter. But at the time, they didn't give any explanation of what the contrivance was. I suppose they wanted to test it out under all conditions before they let the public in on it. But last night they told us all about it. It's a film that does the talking." "A film?" exclaimed Bob in surprise. "That's just what it is," affirmed Dr. Dale. "They showed it to Edison when he was up there the other day, and he was astonished. And anything that astonishes that wizard must be pretty good." "I should say so," acquiesced Bob. "Please tell me just what it is and how it works." "It's something like this," replied the doctor. "I'll try to give it to you as nearly as I can in the very words that were used in explaining it. The purpose of the device is to record sounds on a photographic film so that the sound may later on be exactly reproduced in ordinary telephones and loudspeakers. The record is made by causing the sound waves to produce vibrations on a very delicate mirror. A beam of light reflected by this mirror strikes a photographic film which is constantly in motion. When the film is developed, it shows a band of white with faint markings on the edges which correspond to the sound which has been reproduced. On account of the exceedingly small size of the mirror, it has been found possible to produce a sound record which includes the delicate overtones which give quality to speech and musical sounds. Do you get my meaning? I can understand how the film is made, replied Bob thoughtfully. But after it is made, how is the sound reproduced? I was coming to that, replied the doctor. The reproduction of the sound from the film is brought about by moving the film in front of an exceedingly delicate electrical device, which produces an electromotive force that varies with the amount of light that falls upon it. By an ingenious combination of vacuum tubes, there's been produced an apparatus which responds to variations in the light falling on it with the speed of light itself, or with the speed of propagation of wireless waves into space. Therefore, when this film is moved continuously in front of such a device, the device produces an electric current which corresponds very accurately to the original sound wave. This electric current may be used to actuate a telephone or loudspeaker. When this was told to us last night, I thought that it was the announcer who was talking. But as a matter of fact, it was the film that was talking. The voice of the announcer had first been recorded on the film and then was sent out with such accuracy that we were all fooled into believing that the announcer himself was speaking to us at first hand. That certainly showed how good it was, exclaimed Bob. It's nothing less than magic. It sometimes seems as though it couldn't be real, as if radio must be a dream. A dream that has come true, answered the doctor as he smilingly said goodbye and went on his way. End of section 5 of The Radio Boys with the Forest Rangers by Alan Chapman. Read by Tom Hirsch.